which were not subject to any kind of democratic control. And of course, those military establishments left unreformed would not only have been a drag on the economy, but would have also been a threat to democracy in the sense of generals who were outside direct political control and whose loyalties, of course, had largely been formed in the Soviet Union in the days of the Warsaw Pact. So for these sort of fragile emerging democracies coming out of the Cold War, the idea that they could get direct assistance in downsizing those military establishments and bringing them under democratic control was very useful. And of course, it's much easier to do that kind of thing, as we know in the economic realm, if some outside agency, and one thinks of the International Monetary Fund in the field of economics, some outside agency is steering the process. Not only giving you advice, but to some degree taking responsibility for that process as well. And of course, don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that back in the 90s, we in NATO, we were going through the same thing as well. We didn't have the problem, I hope, of democratic control of our armed forces, but we certainly did have top-heavy military establishments. We wanted to reap the peace dividend. So to some degree, because we were doing it ourselves, we were better placed to give advice and expertise to the Central and Eastern European countries in how to go about it. But Partnership for Peace, which was invented by NATO at Truman Hall, the US ambassador's residence in Tervuren, not far from here, in 1994. Partnership for Peace was not just a good sort of military program, but it was also very politically savvy. Why? Well, I think the first reason is because there was a very low threshold to join. One did not have to be a mature democracy to join the PFP. Virtually every country that wanted entry after 1994 was granted it. For example, when the Soviet Union collapsed and turned into 15 countries, they all more or less automatically, as successor states of the Soviet Union, became members of the Partnership for Peace. This, therefore, was popular in Eastern Europe, precisely because it didn't mean going through a long agonizing period of domestic political reform before one could become a member. Secondly, the Partnership for Peace posed no threat to neutrality. Indeed, today, the most probably energetic and active partners are indeed the former, or what we used to call the neutral countries. Today, I think they tend to use the term non-aligned, but they, of course, still formally have not wanted to be a member of a military alliance. I'm talking about Sweden, talking about Finland, obviously Austria, the Irish Republic, and Switzerland. Indeed, Switzerland joined the Partnership for Peace before it joined the United Nations. And the first time since 1815, the Napoleonic Wars, that the Swiss sent forces outside their territory was to Bosnia in the mid-1990s under NATO's Partnership for Peace. This has been important because the Partnership for Peace, in many respects, I believe, has helped these so-called neutral countries to redefine neutrality. In other words, not surrendering non-alignment as a principle, but no longer interpreting non-alignment as not participating, not getting involved, not contributing. In fact, it's remarkable today that those EU countries that are not part of NATO have troops in Afghanistan, troops in Kosovo, have participated in most of NATO's missions, and have invested financially also heavily in partnership activities. So this has been good for both sides. Thirdly, when it comes to the politically savvy aspects of partnership, we introduced in the partnership document a so-called Article 8, which is not a security guarantee, but which allows those countries that feel as if their interests are being threatened to demand, or to ask rather, emergency consultations with the alliance. So it's not a security guarantee, but at least it's a kind of reassurance that you're not alone, guys. If you have a problem, you can bring that problem to NATO, you can put it on the table at NATO, you can get NATO's attention for it. And then I think the next reason why this has been a success, particularly for the partners, is because it's been rather like a Chinese menu. I mean, in my country, the UK, you know, Chinese restaurants are incredibly popular, and as you know, the modus operandi is that you go in, you look at the massive menu, and according to your appetite and according to your budget, you select number 32, number 43, number 56, etc. And everybody, of course, has a different combination, right? Because everybody has a different appetite and different resources. And so the flexibility of the partnership has been a key ingredient of success. The notion of, you know, there's no one size fits all. Every country can look at this program of activities, the menu, and basically decide, you know, well, you know, we need help with demining. We need help with getting rid of lots of surplus ammunition. We need help with a new defense doctrine or restructuring our ministries or whatever, and NATO then accepts in the form of the Chinese restaurant to sort of help you to cook the meal with the ingredients and to provide the solution that you like. Finally, the partnership, of course, is also, to some degree, a seal of democratic respectability. It's no accident, for example, that in recent years, Bosnia, Montenegro, more recently Serbia, notwithstanding, in the case of Serbia, historical difficulties with the alliance that are well known, obviously, notwithstanding these, Serbia has seen the partnership as a kind of badge of democratic responsibility. It's a kind of coming out process, and as something which would facilitate, obviously, negotiations with the European Union on a stabilisation and association agreement. So countries, let's be frank, have wanted it as much for the sort of the political stamp of approval as they have wanted it for the concrete military-to-military security sector reform, defence reform assistance that it provides. But it's been useful for NATO too, as I said, enlightened mutual self-interest. I used in my lecture last week the phrase of Douglas Hurd, the comfortable waiting room, which is that you give the new democracies something substantive while you are waiting to define a long-term vision. And it was good, useful after the Cold War for NATO to have the partnership as something that showed we were engaging while we were still thinking through the rationale for actually enlarging NATO. That said, as I told you last week, we quickly discovered that if you did not link partnership to the perspective of membership, it would lose a lot of its attraction, a lot of its force. It's like having an engagement with no prospect of marriage, clearly. But still, secondly, the partnership arrangements meant that NATO could realistically expect support in crises. Kosovo, 1999, we needed to station forces in Albania, including Apache helicopters. The fact that Albania had been a partner of NATO facilitated that, particularly through negotiating things like status of forces agreements that allow foreign troops to be legally either transited or stationed on foreign territory. Macedonia was another country, or former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, as I say, we call it in the official NATO language, needed also to be the host country for the forces that eventually went into Kosovo